Filmmaker Alex Garland is responsible for some incredible cinema. As a screenwriter, he gave us 28 Days Later and Dread. His first two films as a director, Ex Machina and Annihilation, are two of my favorite films of the last decade. So I was quite intrigued by the prospect of his newest film, Civil War, which sees him eschewing the sci-fi genre to deliver a warning about American political polarization through a film about an imagined civil conflict and the war reporters working to cover it. Unfortunately, while Civil War is certainly a film that inspires much thought and discussion, after seeing it, I think the British director should go back to sci-fi and never touch American politics again. Civil War, contrary to what the title may evoke, is not a film interested in the particulars of this second American Civil War, the major power players in it, or its military battles. Instead, it's a film exclusively about a group of journalists reporting on it. These journalists, legendary photojournalist Lee Smith, played by Kirsten Dunst, Reuters reporter and adrenaline junkie Joel, played by Wagner Moura, veteran New York Times journalist Sammy, played by Stephen Henderson, and aspiring young photographer Jesse Cullen, played by Kaylee Spaney, they don't seem to be doing a lot of actual reporting in Garland's film. Despite encountering several vital stories along the way, the group pursues their main objective with a singular focus. That objective is to score an interview with the embattled president in Washington, D.C. as secessionist forces close in on the city. Unfortunately, if you're looking for more details on this confusing conflict, you won't find many more in Garland's film. While technically brilliant and truly fascinating, Civil War is irredeemably flawed because of Garland's script, which posits borderline nonsensical political alliances, lacks depth in its world building, and shortchanges its reasonably interesting characters. It raises intriguing ideas about political violence, the job of war reporting, and whether images of war that journalists capture actually make a difference. But Garland seems uninterested in fully pulling on many of these compelling threads he's set up. I don't like to rely too much on authorial intent because at the end of the day, art is in the eye of the beholder. But Civil War is impossible to truly parse without considering Garland's intention. The references to Full Metal Jacket and Come and See are quite obvious. Garland's film is intended to be an anti-war film about a conflict that has not yet come to pass. It's meant to be a warning against continuing down the path of extreme political polarization we find ourselves on. There's no such thing as an anti-war film, legendary director Francois Truffaut once said, speaking to the near impossible task of negatively portraying images of war in cinema, a medium that almost inherently gives these images entertainment value. This is true for many war films, as they chase the entertainment and function as propaganda for whatever side they choose to make the heroes. Garland's inspirations, Full Metal Jacket and Come and See, are two films that stand in defiance of Truffaut's supposition. Both films attempt to disturb their audiences with their violent imagery instead of entertaining them. And most importantly, both films clearly define the sides of their conflicts and have a moral viewpoint. A true anti-war film doesn't just say war is bad. It seeks to dissuade its audience from the allure of blood-soaked patriotism, complicate the hero-villain dynamic we try to place on war, and ultimately contend with the politics and ideologies driving the conflict. Garland's intention may have been anti-war, but his film is not. Again, it's Garland's refusal to give us necessary details about this conflict that scuttle its anti-war intentions. It's silly to think that war is never necessary. In fact, within the context of this film, it would seem that a civil conflict is entirely necessary to defeat a fascist president. So it's important to understand the contours of this civil war in order to parse not good guys and bad guys, but whether actions being taken can be justified as necessary. Plus, considering that this is Garland's dire warning to Americans of where our politics may lead, the film would be much more effective if we could actually draw lines to real-world dynamics, political parties, figures, etc. People immediately butt up against the alliance between Texas and California because it doesn't make any sense to us within our current political landscape. It is a provocative choice, Garland has said, meant to question why we believe that partisan politics would matter more to these states than a fascist president. But it is a provocation without a sensible goal. Since we know next to nothing about the political alignment of Nick Offerman's fascist president, it gives us two very dumb options. If the president is aligned with the Republican Party, we can easily imagine that Texas Republicans would have few qualms backing him. Just look at any of their statements on the January 6th insurrection. If he's a Democrat, I would be more willing to accept that California Democrats would oppose him, but what is Garland saying with that? Despite any issues people may have with the Democratic Party, and there are certainly many, they aren't actively engaged in anti-democracy rhetoric or actions like, say, the Republicans are. The world building here is just so damn thin, which would be less of a problem if the film were not intended to be a grand statement on current American politics. But given that it is, how are we supposed to find a coherent reading when we have such little context? It seems that Garland tried to make his film as apolitical as possible in order to be all things to all people. But in doing that, he also made a film that has very little to say. An anti-war film, I believe, requires a solid worldview. And I would describe Garland's blinkered worldview as why can't we all be friends centrist brain rot. Crass, I know, but it is a worldview that refuses to engage with what I think is an unavoidable truth. In a political landscape where one party has lurched so far to the right, moderation and bipartisanship are untenable because they inherently demand an acceptance of a large swath of a right-wing project that is anti-democracy. Instead of needed context, Garland only offers allusions to words, symbols, and dynamics we may recognize. The fascist president has taken a third term and dissolved the FBI, things that may be signaling to Trump. Some of the forces the journalists encounter seem driven by xenophobia, but those forces don't seem to be aligned with the president. Plus, there are the absurd references to Portland Maoists and an Antifa massacre that were so stupid I laughed out loud in the theater. It all adds up to a cowardly, opaque film that allows Garland's audience to easily graft their own political enemies onto his bad guys and ultimately take delight in the violence perpetrated against them. I wouldn't call that an anti-war film. But what does Civil War tell us about journalism? Here we also have problems. Many critics have hailed Civil War as a film about the importance of wartime journalism, but I can't really square that with the film that I saw. After the journalists stumble upon blatant war crimes, Garland fails to actually show his journalists doing any real reporting. Instead of filing stories about those crimes, they press on to Washington to get their pointless interview. In addition, no one in the group is concerned with recording video for some reason, and Jessie is exclusively using a film camera, meaning that her images are more likely to be out of focus and could easily be destroyed by the elements. Garland's journalists are not only bad at their jobs, though, they also seem to be borderline sociopaths. Lee is as cold and unfeeling as they come, hardened by the things she has witnessed over her career. Her most important line, "We record so other people can ask questions," also echoes Garland's centrist worldview in which journalists may never take a side, even if that side is against blatant evil. Joel and his colleagues that he comes across are framed as adrenaline junkies, taking perverse pleasure in the things they are witnessing. And though Jessie starts out as a naive, moralistic young woman, she ends the film just as craven as the rest, perhaps more so. At one point in the film, Joel and Jessie are watching a battle light up the night sky some distance away. "That gunfire is making me extremely effing hard," Joel exclaims. It recalls the words spoken by NBC News anchor Brian Williams in 2017. President Trump had just launched a volley of missiles at Syria, and many were fearful we may be on the verge of yet another war in the Middle East. As Williams looked upon the images, he quoted a Leonard Cohen song, saying, "I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons." It is a fitting allusion because I think it speaks quite well to Garland's worldview, from which most of Civil War's problems come. The lyric comes from Cohen's 1988 song, "First We Take Manhattan," and Cohen described it as a song about the allure of the extreme and the danger in that allure. In a 1993 interview, when talking about the line, he spoke about his fascination with extreme positions and his fight to resist them. I felt for some time that the motivating energy or the engrossing energy available to us today is the energy coming from the extremes. That's why we have Malcolm X. And somehow, it's only these extremist positions that can compel our attention. Garland on the Civil War press tour said something related when talking about the political polarization in America. Left and right are ideological arguments on how to run a state, but we've made it into good and bad. We've made it into a moral issue, and it's effing idiotic and incredibly dangerous. Well, I find Garland's assertion that there is no moral difference between the American left and right, as well as Cohen's assertion that Malcolm X was some dangerous extremist to be resisted, effing idiotic. What the American government does with its power is a moral issue, and we can actually denote what are good and bad policy choices. In American politics, supposedly extremist positions on the left include things like universal health care, prison abolition, queer rights, protections for immigrants, and full access to abortion. Meanwhile, extremist positions on the right include a full ban on abortion and trans health care, whittling away at our meager social safety net, opposition to civil rights protections for minority groups, and the push to undermine our very democratic process. If Malcolm X was the extremist in his day on the left, George Wallace was a counterexample on the right. And I think the morality of their positions is pretty clear. If this country is once again pulled into a civil conflict, it will not be because the left could not find common ground with the right. Right-wing politicians like Donald Trump, who have stoked racist and reactionary sentiment in order to undermine our democratic institutions, will be to blame. During America's original Civil War, President Lincoln didn't seek a moderate position, but attacked the cancer at the heart of the country by completely ending the abhorrent institution of slavery. Unfortunately, after the war, his successors once again sought unity over justice and let the cancer of segregation live for another 100 years. With the rise of a new reactionary movement that seeks to pull us back from the progress we have made, we are once again facing a crisis. Will we seek unity or justice? Will we compromise with those who don't believe in democracy or fight against them? Civil war offers no solutions and asks the wrong questions. It may be a work of tremendous filmmaking, but it is ultimately soulless and empty. Alex Garland, I beg of you, please go back to England and stop lecturing us about American politics. I'm giving Civil War 2.5 out of 5 stars. It is currently available on VOD.